All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 8th, right around 8 o'clock in the a.m. And we're here for this week's Energy for All Alaska Task Force. As a note, our guest today is Mr. Tim Sullivan. He's the Director of External Affairs with the Alaska Railroad Corporation, here to give us an update regarding the Alaska Railroad, our in-state railroad system and our in-state railroad corporation. A couple of their initiatives that they have currently on docket, but as well as a little bit of information regarding some things a little closer to home. As a special note, a couple of notes here at the very top of the meeting. First of all, as always, good old Mr. Tim is an old hand with our task force. So he knows the process, he knows the game, and so he knows that, you all have the option of either lobbing your questions or comments in the chat, but also just going ahead and unmuting and firing away. So please feel free. A little note on later this week. As you know, we've been working to put together a special presentation in cooperation with the Chamber of Commerce regarding the Manchelle project. The Transportation Committee for the Chamber does have on their schedule a presentation from Kinross on Thursday. I believe at 7:30 in the morning, their meetings start. We got agreement from Janelle over at the Chamber, the president and CEO, as well as a couple of representatives from Kinross to do a joint presentation, i.e. we get to log into that Chamber Transportation meeting. But I found out yesterday that no one had actually reached out to chair to get permission. So I am going to be reaching out to the chair just to make sure that's okay. It's a courtesy, but just know that if I receive that approval, I will go ahead and be sending out a link later today of the Zoom so that we can all log in. All right, so with that out of the way, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Sullivan. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Jomo. Appreciate it. Always happy to be here. It's been quite a while since I had an opportunity to present to you folks. I think the last time we did it, we actually did it in person. So that'll give you a timeline of how long it's been since we've had the opportunity to chat. So just want to reiterate what Jomo said. This always goes better if it's a dialogue. So if you do have questions, go ahead and just shout them out. I'll stop and answer what I can, and we'll just continue moving through this. I don't have a lot of slides. I imagine that there's more opportunities for conversation than there is for me to be on the lecture circuit. So we'll go ahead and get kicking from there. But again, thanks for having me here. As we go along, whenever we start out a railroad presentation, we always talk about safety. This is one of our favorite Fairbanks safety pictures of an incident in our yard that I think many of you have seen before, where somebody decided to jump the curb, jump the tracks, and end up leaning their nice little BMW up against the one of our fuel tanks sitting in the yard. So always important to remember safety when it's around railroad trains. When you're on the tracks, it's never a place to be. And when you're crossing, we always ask you to go perpendicular to the tracks and get out of the way as quickly as you can, because trains move pretty quietly and it takes them a long time to slow down. So, and they can't dodge you. They continue to move in a straight line. So it's always an issue for us. Starting right off with what we've been seeing for, in terms of money for the last decade or so, what's been happening at the railroad in the big overall picture. As you can see, we've, been seeing some steady growth over the course of the last decade, except for a couple of years that stand out pretty dramatically. 2020 was a bad year for everybody, including the railroad. We saw, an overall loss of about $7.8 million. Did a lot of belt tightening, did a lot of looking out there as to what we could be doing better and a little more efficiently. And we're looking at 2021, came back, and I'll explain a little bit about that, came back in pretty good shape. One of the big things that we saw in there was a land sale for about $5 million. And so that makes a big chunk of what that net income is for 2021. But additionally, we saw some increases in the passenger service that we did that made up for what had happened in 2020 as everybody went through, as we started out the whole COVID debacle. So
Actually, Jim,
yeah.
If I could just get the ball rolling. Last slide, you mentioned a large land sale, $5 million.
Yes.
Where
so
was
that? Just on the outskirts of Anchorage here to Eklutna Native Corporation. We sold off a piece of land that had been non-producing for us. We got cash and mostly we got land in trade. And so that counts as a positive on our balance sheet. They are able to develop some resources in that area that we aren't able to, turn into a new gravel pit in the Eklutna area. And we got some more land for our yard in the Birchwood area, which will allow us to do more laydown for companies like Spinard Builders Supply and other big clients that we have that like to have more area to lay down materials as they come in and need somewhere to be stored. So that's turned out to be a very good win-win all the way around for both us and Eklutna in terms of developing new resources for the state and us being able to provide more opportunities for our customers.
Well, and I understood that in response to last year, a number of companies were bringing in extra inventory just to have it on hand against possible supply disruptions.
I think Spinard Builders is probably one of those as well. And I know that they have always been big on doing that as well. So we'll see. We're happy to be able to do what we can with them, and as well as some of the other customers who are looking to do exactly that. And I'll actually talk a little bit more about what we've been seeing with freight in terms of our barge service and how that has been reflected in that.
You also did had some land sales up here in the community too a couple of years ago there along the river.
We did. We've actually had quite a few land sales up in the interior. We're required to go to the legislature to get permission to do two things, one of which is to sell land, and the other one is to take on public debt. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we went down to Juneau with a list of properties that we wanted to put out into the public to make sure, there's some things that I guess I should back up a little bit. So when the railroad got transferred over from the federal government, it came along with 36,000 acres of land. About half of that, about 18,000 acres, we used for railroad purposes, whether it be our right of way or railroad yards or anything like that. The other $18,000 is land that's available for lease or sale, and we like to lease the land as much as we can when it makes sense, because that sort of came over as our dowry. That's what helps us weather the ups and downs of economic cycles. When passenger service goes down, or when freight service goes down, or when we see a pandemic, like we just recently did, it gives us the opportunity to kind of smooth out those bumps a little bit, having that real estate dowry. So as we look at our sheet of what we have, there are certain things that just don't really make sense for the railroad to hold on to. Some of those are residential properties. So we took the opportunity for that piece of land over there across the river from the Carlson Center to turn that into residential with Chena Landings. We've also got rid of some of the land that we've owned forever in Healy, the Tri-Valley subdivision, which we had for decades been leasing to Usabelli, who then sublet it to their tenants who had homes on the property. Now those folks are able to own the homes and own the land that their homes are on down there. Some other property around Otto Lake in the interior as well, and some properties down here in Anchorage up on Government Hill that are used for low-income housing. It allowed those folks to go in and get federal grants and federal funding to be able to do major renovations to the low-income housing that's up on Government Hill. So, it's having that opportunity to look at what's either low-producing or non-producing property and doesn't really fit into what we should be managing as a railroad. Commercial property, industrial property, long-term leases, those sorts of things. If we can get those off our balance sheet, it's good to do. So we're happy about that.
Appreciate it. I know that was a little off the subject at hand, but thank you for the indulgence.
No worries. So, okay. So off the bottom line, into the passenger operations, which is always fun to talk about. This is the sexy part of the operation that we do. People love our blue and yellow locomotives and cars and our silver wheels and everything else. And as you can see, what happened in 2020 to everybody else happened to us as well. That yellow bar on the bottom represents our cruise passenger traffic, the folks that ride in those Holland America Princess cars and that come up every year. The blue are the ones that ride in our cars. And in 2020, we lost about 95% of that traffic. We were pleasantly surprised, and I think everybody was a bit surprised, of what happened in 2021 when it became the year of the independent traveler. Those 200,000 people that ended up traveling on our trains traveled all in our cars because there were no cruise ships coming up. And that was a great surprise for us, and we were really happy to see it. We had reduced passenger service. We went from 14 trains a day between, or 14 trains a week between Anchorage and Fairbanks down to 8. But we were able to fill up those trains for the most part and provide service to just about everybody who wanted to make that trip. Seward continued to be, the Anchorage to Seward Lake continued to be a good producer for us as well. And so I'll talk here in a second about what we're looking for in 2022. But first, talk about one of the places we're really enjoying seeing growth. And you can see before 2020, we were seeing a steady increase in our winter passenger service. This is strictly the travel between Anchorage and Fairbanks in the off season. And those numbers increasing with tourism from Asia and Europe as well. Folks coming over in the wintertime has seen some continued growth. And those numbers for the 2021 season are good. We started our midweek service between Fairbanks and Anchorage up again this month, and we're starting to see more and more people, and think that 2022 is going to be similar to 2019 in terms of what the winter passenger service brought to us. So it's a great, it's small, you know, compared to the numbers that we're looking at on the other page, 500,000 visitors coming up in the summertime. But every little bit of that helped out providing our year-round regularly scheduled passenger service that we provide. And we really are happy to see that, as it kind of balances out what we do between the summer and the winter, so that we can keep folks on year-round rather than being as seasonal as we have been in the past. So I'm actually going to go back just a second and talk just a little bit more about this. Oh no, yeah. So you know, in 2022, we're already starting to see pretty good numbers. The cruise ships are expected to come back in force. We're hearing great things from all of our cruise lines, the Royal Caribbean, the Norwegian, and the All America Princess folks, about what they're seeing for bookings. And frankly, for us as well, we're seeing online and phone bookings that are through the roof. So we are hopeful that our numbers will be similarly close to what we saw in 2019, if all holds. If we continue to see the pandemic turn into an endemic, and folks are willing and wanting to travel, which we understand they are, we should see a pretty good season for 2022 in terms of passenger operations.
On this slide, actually, Tim, on the last slide,
Yeah.
on in-state.
Yeah.
If I may, a couple of quick questions. So as a parent, you know, I'm always looking for a nice little adventure, particularly midwinter, and I guess I never really considered a ride on the railroad. Can you give us a note on, say, schedule, pricing, and are there any, is it kind of any kind of in-state ridership discounts as far as locals?
So we aren't allowed to give in-state discounts because we receive federal money for our passenger service. So that's one of the restrictions that put on receiving federal grants that we apply for. However, this service, winter service, has been great. We go all year round. We do northbound on Saturday between Anchorage and Fairbanks, and southbound on Sunday. And for the last couple of years, up until COVID, we've been providing our midweek service as well around Christmas time, New Year's, and then starting in mid-February, going until mid-April, that we do another Tuesday, Wednesday up and back. That allows for people to extend that stay whichever direction they're going, whether they're going north or south. So Jomo, I don't have the pricing right here in front of me. I can certainly look that up real quick, but it is a great opportunity to get on the train, and you know, it's a haul. It's a 12-hour stretch on the train, but you know, I've done that a couple of times in the middle of winter when I've had opportunities to be up in Fairbanks in November or December, and then have my family fly up for the weekend, and then we'll take the train back on a Sunday, and that has always been just really enjoyable and a nice way to get together and do some family activity. So it turns out really good. We're seeing a lot more folks doing that sort of thing, where they'll, you know, open-ended, where they'll take the train up one way and fly back, or they'll stay for a week and are able to take the train back the following Sunday, which is great as well.
Well, it's nice to know we have another really great staycation option.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, actually, we do have a question here in the chat box. Is there a midweek train operating right now?
There is, Kristen. We just started that up last week. So our midweek service has started up, and I believe it's the Tuesday, Wednesday round trip, and folks can jump on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see here. So you've all seen our charts and graphs about our freight service in the past, and all the things we operate, all the commodities that we carry, whether it's gravel or coal or refined petroleum products, and the troubles we've had over the last couple of years with the loss of export coal, the shutdown of the refinery in North Pole. Those were two of our biggest lines of service, and so those were pretty big hard hits over the course of the last decade. But something that's been shining lately, and just want to kind of focus on a little bit, is our Interline barge service. And we run right now between Seattle and Whittier. We run once a week on this roll-on, roll-off barge that provides rail cars coming in from across the country. And frankly, we even get rail cars from Mexico that come all the way up, carrying, for the most part, equipment and materials for going up to the North Slope. And the last year and a half has just been overwhelming in terms of our demand on this service. While it's a small part of what we do in overall volume, it continues to be growing and growing. And this year alone, where we have the usual 52 trips a year, it's already looking like we're going to have to put on 15 or more special barges just to be able to get the materials that are coming out of the lower 48 up to Whittier and then roll them on up to Fairbanks, where they then get trucked to the North Slope. It's just been an overwhelming amount of material that's been coming in there. Excuse me, sorry about that. And so we're really happy about what's going on with this service. Of course, every time we've got to put on an extra barge, we don't make exactly quite the revenue we do off our regular barge service, but it's great to have. Seeing all of this stuff that's coming into Alaska, and all of it really represents growth on the slope and growth in other industries as well, because we bring up everything from pipes to drilling mud to the big crusher balls that Kinross uses, and Fort Knox, and all sorts of materials that are really, really heavy stuff that travels best on rail from across the country, and able to get it all the way shipped to Fairbanks in what's the longest rail haul in North America. Some of the stuff that comes up from Florida ends up in Fairbanks in the same rail car that it came up in, and that's nearly 5,000 miles of travel, reducing a lot of costs when you have to rehandle materials or equipment as it's coming up and move it to a different form of transport. So great to see growth in that, great to see what that represents, what's going on in the state, and happy to continue to see that going.
When you say own Interline barge service, or I don't think you said own, the little note says from Linden on the barge. So yeah, really, this is your contracting for barge service.
No, we're partners in this. So we are, this is a barge service that Linden operates, but we're partners in the service. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Railroad is much more of a going concern than I sometimes remember.
We like to think so.
Well, we have that interlude. Again, please be reminded that if you have questions, you may post them in the chat box, or you may unmute and ask questions. I'm not trying to run the show so much as just keep the pump primed. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so I talked a little bit about this. What's next coming up in summer of 2022? We're seeing increased demand. We're seeing folks who got a lot of pent-up demand. And of course, as things go, they continue to see Alaska as exotic but safe. And we're hopeful that all the numbers that everybody's seeing are going to pan out for the summer, and we're going to be back and having everybody on our trains, visiting Fairbanks, visiting everywhere else in the state, and spending a lot of money to keep us all happy. So we're looking forward to what's going to be going on with that. We'll talk about, Jomo mentioned we've got a few projects going on. Start out talking about some of the stuff you've heard about, some of the stuff you may not have heard about. One of the biggest things we've got going on right now in terms of, the passenger service we've been talking about is our passenger dock in Seward. That's the one in the middle there. We've got the 3 docks down there. On the left-hand side, you see our freight dock. The middle is the passenger dock. On the right is the coal loading facility, which has been kind of mothballed for several years since export coal has stopped. This year, we're actually down in, as I mentioned before, there's 2 things that we have to get permission to do from the legislature. One being sell land, the other one is to take on debt. And so we're actually in the process in Juneau right now, getting authority to go out and bond for about $60 million to replace this dock. can end up being longer and narrower. You have the ability to bring on two of the largest ships that are traveling in Alaska at this time at the same time. So ships well over 1,000 feet each. We'll be able to put two of them on there at a time. We've got quite a few double birthdays down in Seward, and back in 2019 we had 230,000 people come across that dock. Big chunk of them, about 40,000 of them end up riding on our trains as part of our cruise passengers. And then there's thousands more who also end up traveling as independent travelers and make their way north to Anchorage and Denali and Fairbanks along the way. So that's become a real important project for us. We're in a rush to get it done as well. We've got a strategic partnership with Royal Caribbean. They are going to become an anchor tenant for us there and guarantee that they're going to be there for the next 20 to 30 years, bringing in ships in that cross Gulf traffic, which will be great as a guarantee for what's happening in Seward and bringing folks to the rail belt. And I've got a question in the chat here.
Oh, that's actually regarding the Manchelle project.
Yep. So,
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
So yes, I believe when we just talked, it was both a dock upgrade and extension, but as well as some other shore facilities.
Yeah, so you see that building that's right there on the dock. That has been our terminal facility for passengers coming in. That was originally built as a freight building, so it's not quite up to snuff for being a check-in, check-out for passengers on the cruise ship. So we'll be building a new terminal facility as well. That building that's on the edge of the dock, we'll be building it on the land. So that'll give us a lot more dock space as well without having that 30,000 square foot building on the dock. So we got a big project going on down there. At the same time, we received a $20 million federal grant to do work on our freight dock over there on the left. We'll be extending that and building more facilities up on land for that as well. So we've got a lot of projects going on down in Seward, and all of that leads to bringing more stuff into the state and taking more things out of the state as well to be able to continue to make the economy grow. So we're really happy about all that's going on down there.
If I may, Tim, relatively speaking, how much freight comes through, say, the Seward dock? I'm really asking you this. Again, we all have an understanding of the challenges that are facing the port of Anchorage. And again, well, if something were to go wrong, the capacity of other ports to pick up that slack.
Jomo, that's actually a really good question. We've gotten a lot of support from the municipality of Anchorage and from the port of Alaska Anchorage for the work that we're doing down there on our freight dock. They see that as as the backup should something happen in Anchorage. We've got the ability right now to take in most of what would be coming in through Anchorage, but with the expansion that we'll be doing, we'll be able to bring in bigger ships with more material and be able to move stuff quite a bit faster in terms of the emergency backup of a dock, as well as continuing to see, that dock continues to see operations all year round, whether it's freight coming in or ships that are coming in for repair work during the winter. Seward has become quite the operation down there for year-round service for ships coming in for repairs and maintenance and other operations that they need. So this is going to be a real benefit to that as well, to continue to make Seward moving year-round.
And I guess a final point or two, a question and then a point. So of course, this would be timed to not disrupt your general operations or at least minimize that impact.
Yeah, absolutely. We're as soon as this 2022 season is over, we'll be doing some major work. In fact, we'll be removing that building as soon as this season is over, and some other work that we can do on the dock without damaging its structure, without making it unusable. And then as soon as the 2023 season is over, the dock will be removed immediately and construction will begin on the new dock. It's every expectation that we should be able to get that done in the 8 to 9 month window between the two seasons.
Super. And I guess finally, just a reminder note, this is all being done, the Alaska Railroad portion is being done under its own horsepower. Again, it's its own individual separate corporation. And so the debts that it would incur would be its own.
I think it's a real important thing to put out, that this is not state debt. The state has no obligation at all. We use our own bonding authority, and the bonding will be based simply on the revenue that comes over that dock. So it will be a pretty well self-contained payment and construction operation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so things that are a little closer home to home for you folks. I know there's been a lot of conversation going on lately about the new mining operation going on down in the Tetland area, and that has brought up the conversation about the Northern Rail extension and whether it would make sense to have rail heading down that way, at least as far as Delta Junction, and then see what happens after that. As you're all aware, you know, we've been involved in this project for, gosh, going on 15 years now, I think. And the bridge that was built in Salcha was completed 7 or 8 years ago. We've started to dust off the numbers for what it would take to complete that project. A lot of conversation going on down in Juneau, conversation starting in DC as well as to what it would take. You know, when we last did an estimate on it of completing that all the way down to Delta Junction, it was anywhere from $850 million to $1 billion. Sort of back of the napkin calculations are that number is going to be 25 to 40% higher based on time and based on the cost of materials at this point in time. So that puts us anywhere from about 1.1 to 1.4 billion dollars to complete the line all the way down there. And as we look at, we completed the EIS. There's still some right of way that needs to be acquired, as well as some other federal hoops to jump through. We think that if everything were to fall into order and get things cooking here pretty quickly, it'd take just about 5 years to get the construction all the way done to Delta Junction. So those conversations have started up. I know it's a big thing for folks thinking about what development can go on in the interior, and we're happy to be a part of it if we can get this thing going again. So I think it's about the long and the short of it. I expect there may be some questions on that one.
Yeah, if we could just go ahead and pause.
Yeah.
I would open up the floor to questions. If you feel like if you have one, you can either raise your hand or with no one queuing up, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and fire away. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start. So first of all, thank you, Steve Thompson. He's the guy that helped push that bridge forward. So thank you, Representative Steve Thompson. So you said roughly a 5-year timeline?
Yep.
With all the federal infrastructure money, what would you say are the possibilities, or have you identified any funds that might be able to help defray the cost?
So they're pretty, a lot of the federal funds that came out are pretty focused on where they want work to be done, the kind of projects they want to do. There is one pot of money that has been talked about. It's called the mega funds. Those are projects from anywhere from $100 million to $500 million. There's certain opportunities that are available there to be able to do work, especially if we're able to break down this project. Excuse me. Like you can see here, starting out with the 13 miles from Chena River overflow down to the Tanana River crossing, being able to pull out that chunk. But these are going to be highly competitive grants. These are going to be, facing up against projects all over the lower 48. And as big as the projects are, there's still going to be a limited amount of opportunities to get those. What's probably the best way to do this is to get the Department of Defense back online, because they were the ones who were driving this project from the beginning and came up with the lion's share of the funding to build the bridge across the Tanana. So if Department of Defense comes online and makes this a priority again, there's great opportunities using DoD money to be able to build this project, although there might be some IIJA money as well.
Okay, looks like we have, I see we have a question in the chat box or a comment. Your comments on the North Slope regarding large supply shipping north. What projects are you aware of that Fairbanks companies are not? Local companies are cutting budgets because of lower jobs and projects on the slope.
I'll tell you, I don't know any of the specifics. All I know is that we're moving stuff. At the end of the day, we're a bit of a canary in the coal mine, and seeing so much material moving, we can only assume that there's big things going on somewhere.
Okay. If we can loiter on this just one more second, you mentioned the competitiveness of some of these grants, or many of these funding pots that are becoming available. Is there kind of a rule of thumb regarding match? I mean, generally speaking, the rule of thumb regarding, say, highway funds, and why we've had capital budgets in roughly the $100 million to $150 million bracket is like kind of a 10-to-1 leveraging. $100 million leveraging, say, $1 billion worth of federal funds. Is that a fair rule of thumb regarding rail as well?
Usually what we see is about 5-to-1. We see it as a 20% match on our end. And, for a lot of the projects out there, if you can boost that number up, all things being equal, if you come in with a 25% match instead of a 20% match, your project's going to be the one. So, 20% has been pretty standard for what we see for monies that we use, whether it's FHWA or Federal Railway Administration or Federal Transit Administration. When we look at grants, that's pretty much the standard that we see. Now there are some of the programs that have been, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's at least one or two that have gone from requiring a 20% match to a 100% federal funding. But most of those are for very small projects, things under $10 million. So those are some opportunities, I think, for railroad crossings and for rail improvement, maybe even some bridge repair that are out there specifically for railroads that we'll be taking a look at over the course of the next year or two to see where we can figure out ways to get in. And if they get rid of the match on some of those, that'd be fantastic and be able to move things up on our list.
Okay. And then we do have a quick comment in the, we're starting to get them now. We did have a comment in the chat regarding, you mentioned DoD funding, and I scribbled it down immediately. Do you have any visibility on possible DoD interest?
We don't. This conversation's just been starting over the course of the last couple of months because of the new mining propositions going on down the road. We have not heard any more interest from DoD in terms of whether they think that this is a project that has come back to the top of the heap for them. So I know that those conversations are starting with the congressional delegation. People are reaching out. Representative Cronky has a resolution in now for the congressional delegation to ask them to work with the Department of Defense to try and find funding to do this project and bring it back to the top of the list. So we're supportive of that resolution that he's put in, and we'll see what comes of that. But I think that the delegation is aware of what's going on here and wants to do what they can to support it.
Outstanding. And actually, that's a really good data point regarding, well, the two really great data points. First, the 20% match, but that 5-year construction timeline, the fact that if the stars could be made to align,
right,
that again, we could do this in, say, 5 years.
Right, if everything worked out just right.
Okay. that would be nice. We do have a couple of other questions in the chat box. Actually, one regards the missiles shipped to Greeley. Do they come over the rail?
No, they're trucked.
So I would assume they come in components and they're assembled on site. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, again, I would open it up. This is a hot item of community discussion. Actually, again, it's been a long running. Once you mentioned the fact again that the bridge was put in actually to help, really is to help access to the trading grounds. But again, with rail extensions, it could be so much more useful. Are there any further questions on this item at this time? Okay, please know that I'm sure Mr. Sullivan would be open to us circling back if questions do come up.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to jump on here real quick. And then I know this isn't in your neighborhood so much, but it is a big project that could affect what you guys have going on in the interior in terms of bringing in LNG or other products or exporting products out through Port MacKenzie down in the Matsu Valley. So this discussion has started up again as well. I don't know that it ever really went away. It's we've been working on this for a number of years of putting in, what is it, 33 miles of track from Houston all the way down to Port MacKenzie. Most of the rail bed has been built. About $220 million, I think, has been put into it so far. When it kind of was mothballed several years ago, the expectation was that there was about $125 million worth of work left to do to get that rail all the way down to Port MacKenzie. It's been kind of laying fallow, and it's been, as the representative from Big Lake told me the other day, the world's most expensive snow machine trail, sitting out there for several years. And so we've, got a lot of work to bring it back up to snuff. And the number now is looking in anywhere in the neighborhood of $140 to $160 million to get that back and get the rail on that to go down to Port MacKenzie. So that conversation's still going. There's a lot of interest in Juneau, of course. It's always interesting when we see. I know that the governor has put some money into the GO bonds for the Anchorage and the Port of Anchorage and the Port MacKenzie construction. We'll see what that comes to exactly. It's not really specific on how that money is supposed to be spent or what exactly it's going to be spent on, but we're curious, and we'll see how that goes. And, if we can get rail down to the LNG plant down there, which is about halfway down the line there, what that means for Fairbanks and being able to ship LNG by rail. So opportunities abound.
Can we go ahead and pause there one more second?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Again, I would open it up to questions. Okay, well, then I'll jump back. Oh, I see Mr. Soley has taken himself off mute. Hey, Rick, good morning.
Well, I've lots to ponder and think about. Tim, welcome this morning.
Thanks, Rick.
So as you review these projects, you were talking a little bit about the potential extension down to Delta, for example,
Yep.
And just in general, expansions of the railroad activity. Can you talk a little bit about the economic considerations that you make? Because in the context of Delta extension, it sounds as though your economic considerations are really political. You'd need a grant to extend that line. Whereas, do you ever just look at increased traffic and the justification? I assume that's what you're talking about in Seward, the increased associated activity with the coal terminal is justifying the railroad proposal for the bonding. Can you just talk a little bit about that balance? I think that'd be helpful.
Sure. So what we're able to do is we are able to do revenue bonds, right? That's what we're able to do as the railroad. And so we have to be able to make that economic justification at the end of the day to be able to borrow money, that there's something at the end of that line. There's traffic that is going to be happening. And, when we look at the Seward dock, and we get the passenger dock, and we get the opportunity with a customer like Royal Caribbean who says, yes, we will be an anchor tenant. And we look at really what the growth in the industry looks like over the course of the next couple of decades. Our bonding folks, the industry out there, looks at what we put together as well and then says, yeah, you have a revenue reason to be able to do this. You'll be able to pay off those bonds. Now, go to Port MacKenzie here, and that's, if there's $140 million remaining on there, we're bullish on the idea that if this line is built, the revenues will exist to be able to provide the service that needs to go down there, whether it's to go halfway down and get LNG, or if it's exporting and importing products through Port MacKenzie. However, you throw on another $140 million in debt service on top of that, and it doesn't pencil out. It's not one of those things where the bond industry is going to come to us and say, oh yeah, we think you're going to make X plus 140 million over the course of the next 25 years to be able to pay off those debts. It just isn't there. The opportunities like Port MacKenzie and the Northern Rail extension as well need to have GO bonds or federal monies to come in and build the infrastructure so that we can pay for the service that will happen over those rails, because that service on top of it is just something that would never be able to pencil out, and the investment industry just wouldn't be a part of it. So
Thank you.
It's kind of a long way of going around that, saying, yes, we look at it, we see if there's an economic reason to do it, and we say, yeah, there'll be an economic reason to provide a service, whether it's moving materials between Fort Greely and Fairbanks, whether it's moving people between Fort Greely and Fairbanks, whether this is a first step in going to the border, or opening up this area for mining and potential in all of that. Yeah, we can see that paying off in the long run to pay for what we'd have to do in terms of equipment and crews and maintenance and all that, but that service just it's too big of a nut to crack.
Except in the case of Seward, there you got the base for that expansion.
Right, because we can see that right there, right? We can see that, we can know what those customers look like. That service is already, those customers are already there. It isn't a, gambling on the idea that there's going to be service at the end of the line at Fort Greely or Port MacKenzie, because that service doesn't exist yet. We've been moving passengers in and out of Seward for over 100 years. And on the dock that we've got there, we've been moving them since 1966. So it's a known quantity. And the cruise ship industry is growing and growing and growing. And they've got their numbers and we've got our numbers, and everybody puts their numbers into the hat. And then the bond industry is comfortable with loaning out that money, knowing they're going to get paid back. Because, tax-free bond guys are not what you'd call high risk. These are the most conservative folks in the world when it comes to lending money, and so they really take an opportunity to dig deep into those numbers and make sure that it's going to pay out for them.
Thank you. And pivoting, Jomo, I assume you're going to talk a little bit about railroad and natural gas transportation and ISO containers, those kinds of things. That's a wheelhouse for you. Maybe we'll have some discussion.
I had a little discussion with Tim, but I wasn't planning on it. Is there anyone from IGU here? There is Mr. Prusak, and I guess the short answer is rail is intriguing, but as Tim is noting, there are a few more slips twixt the cup and the lip. When it came to when they tried running rail cars, again, it was a viable system on a structural basis. But my understanding is that the multiple handling necessary at this time, again, trucks or putting the LNG into trucks, driving it to the railhead, transferring it somehow onto the train, bringing it up, then also taking it off the train, putting it back on trucks to move it to the eventual LNG storage site. Again, that multiple handling, of course, would harm the economics. Again, so on a physical, structural basis, they tested that system and it works. But again, it's right now the numbers wouldn't work. And the second thing is that per our volumes at this time, my understanding is that even if the line right now we're running, if all the lines extensions were completed, still the volumes at which IGU is operating aren't quite enough yet to support use of rail. It would still be a bit cheaper to go ahead and use the trucks, just because, again, the smaller volumes and a bit of extra handling and time lags vis-a-vis the railroad. But again, we'll be growing together, I think is probably the best way of putting it, but we're not quite grown yet. Do you think that's about right, Tim?
Yeah, that's fair.
Thank you.
But I'm talking out of turn. So again, if there's anyone from IGU would like to jump on, we'll take it. So again, so what I heard was about $140 million for the extension down to, to complete the line to Point MacKenzie at current estimate.
Right.
What I also got though, and again, we're always looking for rules of thumb that can kind of help relay people with basic analysis of proposals. When I did the math on 80 miles for the Northern Rail extension at a roughly $1 billion, that came to what, $1.250 million per mile, about $1.25 million. Did I get that off?
About 12 and a half. You're off by a zero.
Oh, no. Okay. So I shouldn't have dropped that zero. I was right when I dropped it first. So about $12.5 million per mile.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the running estimate. Okay. and you may not be able to answer this question, but I'll be shameless and ask it anyway. Do you know if you all been approached at all by, say, Kinross for at least preliminary discussions about, kind of costing and possible utilization as yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Very preliminary, understood. So we do have a question in the chat box, two of them actually. Does the West Susitna access road get any consideration? Or how is that, how does there an interplay, if at all?
I don't know. I was going to ask for a little more details. In interplay in what? In terms of moving LNG or us putting rail in through that West Susitna access? I don't know exactly what the question is.
Carl, would you like to go ahead and take yourself off mute?
Roads to resources.
Okay, I'm still not, I mean.
So the West
are you think-
Susitna axis is being developed by ADA to
Yep.
get to resources.
Yep.
And it's coming off of the area close to Port MacKenzie.
Right.
So again, that would be commodities to be shipped to and shipped out.
Sure. I mean, and at this point, I'm not aware of what exactly would be coming through there, but I was actually talking to Jomo the other day, and I said we're a lot like that that one fitness club commercial where the guy says, "I pick things up and put things down," and that's a lot of what we do. If the commodities are there and people want to move them, we've got the ability to do that. We're not the ones who go out and seek out the commodities. That's not what we do as a railroad. But if there are opportunities that new road could provide to bring in stuff to Port MacKenzie or to somewhere along that line, that we could then be moving in or out of the state, that's great. We'll certainly want to play a part in that and do everything that we can to do so.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
So I guess to put a little bow on the discussion regarding, say, how and when the railroad extends itself. Again, from my 15 minutes over at IGU, again, the usual rule of thumb is well, the rule of thumb under utilities is kind of cost causer, cost payer. And so you'll make extensions under your own horsepower if, again, there's a defined market. Again, if you have participants who will help you recoup your expenditures. Otherwise, you'll need something to come help bend the economics. As when IGU got a grant, which allowed it to put in all of that distribution piping in core North Pole and core Fairbanks, but let it sit fallow for 5 or 6 years. It was because it was grant funded that it could make that investment. Otherwise, it would have had to wait again for a more defined demand.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain that. That's exactly what we do.
Oh, okay. I'm on a roll today.
So
we have one other question. I believe it's Jean Venet. Does Manchelle extension go all the way to from Fort Knox to the Tetland mine? It didn't appear so.
The Northern Rail extension?
Yes.
No, at this point, the Northern Rail extension is only planned to Fort Greeley. There hasn't been any consideration or discussions at this point of extending past that. I know that there are some thoughts about it. There's been newspaper articles about it, but we have not been approached on that at this point.
And again, here on the northern end, it would simply come to whatever would be the northernmost terminus of the Alaska Railroad system.
Right.
Okay, but it does, it's clear, if you don't mind flipping back one slide. Yes, but it looks like it clearly does bypass, again, what seems to be the hottest points of discussion, which are, again, currently a 1-lane each way road, mostly dedicated to, kind of person traffic.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's what railroads are designed for, moving big heavy things over long distances. So we're incredibly efficient at doing that, and incredibly safe at doing that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, please, do we have any further questions? Again, everyone can kind of feel free. Oh, we do have another question. Hey, there we go. What is the northernmost terminus for the railroad system currently within town, or really, again, and you can exclude, say, if it was Fort Wainwright, for obvious reasons.
Well, we go all the way out past, past Eielson out to where the refinery used to be. So we've got tracks going all the way out there. This would match up at somewhere around the Chena River overflow, and then head on down that way.
And in the rail yard, your main rail yard there on, say, off of Phillips Field.
Yep.
Oh, which, yeah, as I recall, actually has direct access onto the expressway. At least from the railroad terminal.
Yeah. Oh.
Onto the Johansson Expressway?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. All right. Do we have any further questions so far? Okay, well, we're getting near the top of the hour, but we'll let you go ahead and proceed, sir. Thank you.
Well, I don't have a lot more to cover. We've covered the big projects. Just want to let you know that next year's coming up. It's going to be our big centennial. We'll have a party. Everybody's invited. We'll hopefully have some good, fun things to talk about and what the next 100 years might look like. So be ready to see all sorts of fun things going on with that. And with that, happy to take any more questions.
Well, just a curiosity on my part, because of that last picture, where did the Alaska Railroad start?
So in 1914, Congress passed the Alaska Engineering Act, which created the Alaska Engineering Commission. And the federal government purchased two railroads one that had failed and one that was having a tough time. The one that had failed down in Seward had progressed a couple of dozen miles out of Seward heading north. The other one was in Fairbanks, the Canada Narrow Gauge Railroad. So the federal government purchased those with the purpose of building a railroad from interior Alaska to Tidewater. They wanted to be able to get the resources that you guys had in Fairbanks, as well as the coal that was in Sutton and the Mat-Su Valley, and get that out to Tidewater, particularly to get the coal to support the U.S. Navy in the Pacific and the ships out there. So over the course of 9 years, they built one of the greatest engineering feats that they had seen, had been built at that point in time. And in 1923, President Warren Harding came up here and drove the Golden Spike in Nenana, and then proceeded to head down to the lower 48 and die on his way back. So it actually bookended and worked towards the middle. As opposed to, say, coming all the way. Oh, neat. Exactly.
Okay. Well, Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much for, again, a very, very informative presentation. We appreciate the information regarding Seward. Just for the record, FEDC has written a letter in support of authorizing the Alaska Railroad to do the work it wants to do down in Seward. And so you can know that, again, is it still under consideration, your authorization? Do you know where it is in the process?
The bonding authorization for Seward?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was reading a question that was on that got sent to me. Yeah, we have two bills. They're companion bills, one on the House side, one on the Senate side. The Senate side is sponsored by Senator Pete McChickey out of Seward. It's made its way out of Senate Transportation, is on its way to Senate Finance. On the House side, it's supported by the House Transportation Committee, which is chaired by Representative Hopkins. And it's got another hearing in House Transportation coming up a week from today, and then moves on to House Finance. So we're continuing to see movement on those, and hopefully get those here out and done in just a little bit. So,
okay, so if someone was going to write their own letter of support, I think we'd recommend, say, Hopkins and McChickey, again, knowing
yes.
that again, as sponsors or champions, that that they'll make sure that it gets where it needs to go.
Yes, absolutely. Those would be the best places to send them to. I did get a question about doing conferences on a train, and we do that all the time. We regularly have folks who will either get a couple of cars full of people, 50 to 70 people per car, or we have a couple of specialty cars as well. We have our Aurora car, which is our business car, and we have the Rasmussen car that looks like a 1920s rail car that, for the most part, we use as a charitable donation. We give it out about 12 to 15 times a year for charitable organizations to auction off, and they raise money by doing it. We hook it up on the end of the train going from Anchorage to Seward, and folks are able to bring 15 or 18 people along with them, bring catering, and make a day out of going to Seward, doing whatever they want to do in Seward, and come back. So both of those cars, our business car and our Harding car, or not Harding, it's Aurora and Denali. Both of those cars are used for charitable organizations as well as for businesses that want to be able to do conferences or meetings on the train. In fact, I was just talking with the folks from Alaska Municipal League, or looking at doing something in mid-May, just as we get started for the season. They want to get a car. They've got 50 or so people who want to head down to Seward. They want to do some meetings on the car. And so we regularly do that and really enjoy doing that. We're able to give discounts for groups and for nonprofits who want to be able to do that. And it turns out to be a really, really great opportunity to be able to kind of give back a little bit to organizations in the state. I also want to comment in terms of, one of the hats that I get to wear at the railroad beyond the government communications and the public relations and all that is that being in charge of our philanthropy department. So for nonprofits who are looking for things to auction off or give away to supporters or things like that, we give away 2 tickets a year on any leg that you want to do, that you want to be able to give away to folks, whether it's Fairbanks to Denali or Fairbanks to Anchorage, that you can use in your nonprofits. We've got it online in our charitable giving area for you to be able to fill out a form and send that on in, and we can go ahead and get you guys lined up for that, and really love being able to do that. So seek those sorts of things out. We're happy to help where we can. So I've got one more question from Lisa. Want to know where we ended up with positive control mandates. And I know we talked about that for years on end, and then it just kind of dropped off the radar because we got it done. At the end of December 2020 was the federally required mandate to implement positive train control. And after a cost of about $175 million, part of which we went out and bonded for, using federal funds that we received to pay off those bonds, we were able to complete the project, get it done on time, and are in full compliance with positive train control. So there was a lot of support from a lot of folks in helping us to get that done. We did get some money from the state. We did go out and do bonding, and we're able to get that done using a lot of railroad funds as well. So I want to thank everybody who supported us on that project.
An excellent question, Lisa. I actually asked him the same question trying to set up this presentation because I just assumed it would be one of the subjects, and he let me know it was all done. So very good. Thank you. We do have, I guess, one final question. Actually, it's a good one. Well, I guess, first of all, it's really great hearing regarding, again, the conference or special trip possibility. Again, we don't want to steal too much thunder from our local providers, but again, that sounds like an amazing way to have, say, a board meeting or a retreat or something special like that. There is a question, though, regarding, again, if there was any way to go not all the way to Anchorage, which you said was a 12-hour trip, but maybe on just a loop from Fairbanks to Denali. Is that a possibility? And if so, when in the year would that be?
Yeah, we could do it during the summer, during our regularly scheduled service. It would be a little more difficult for us to get those specialty cars up here, but we can certainly, get you a full car of 50 or 70 people that you can manage on your own and be able to use that. But if there is some real pent-up demand for that business car, the Denali car or the Aurora car, give me a shout. Let's chat, because there might be opportunities for us to be able to do that. We don't often run it all the way up that leg to Fairbanks, because having it on that back of that train for 12 hours, it books it up for 3 days doing it that way because of the back and the forth. But we can certainly talk about it, especially if we have the availability.
Or say, would you be, is there the chance of maybe using those full specialty cars? Say you were having a business retreat, using the full specialty cars down to Denali and then just allowing people to have a nice relaxing ride back? Or would you have to pay for it the whole way down? That's all right. Don't worry about it. It's nice to know that there's an opportunity.
Yeah, there's opportunities. Let's talk about it, because I'm always looking for opportunities to be able to give stuff away.
It sounds that way. Thanks a million, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah,
all right. We're just past the top of the hour, but we're also Yeah, we're right at an hour for when we started the meeting. Again, Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. Great work as always. Our Alaska Railroad. And particularly, thank you again for the information. Again, it lets us have nice little rules of thumb and have a feel for the costs to achieve certain opportunities relative to our community. We really do appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure.
Well, all right, everybody. So that brings us to the end of the show for today. I am still working on a presentation for next week. With the cost of energy spiking the way it is, it may be time for what was originally the Fairbanks Cost of Energy Task Force to maybe have a little discussion regarding energy costs and opportunities again. But for now, again, please know that I'll be circling around with the chair of the Transportation Committee, just to give them a heads up as a politeness check. And I will be informing you ASAP if we are in fact confirmed to be able to attend the Kinross Manchelle Transportation Committee meeting that I believe is going to be 7:30 in the AM on Thursday, along with links. Well, all right, everybody. Again, Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.